Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sparkrock, a partner in the success of Canadian school districts. My name is Mark Keating. I'm Director of Marketing here at Sparkrock, and I'll be your host today. This is the third webinar in our series, Future-Proof Your Districts. The first two webinars in the series were really compelling discussions. Fear not for those that were unable to attend. Recordings were made available to watch on demand. Without further delay, it's my pleasure to welcome our main speakers for today's webinar, James Faw and Brenda Nevo. James is co-founder and chief technology officer at Sparkrock. Prior to founding Sparkrock in 2003, James worked in both for-profit and not-for-profit sectors and has been involved in more than 150 implementations of ERP technology, many of which are in education environments. His more than 20 years experience in the tech sector gives him a unique perspective on the needs of districts. Brenda is a Power Platform architect that joined Sparkrock earlier this year. She comes with a wealth of direct school district experience, working in programming and data visualization that helped the district for whom she worked make informed decisions. We're in very good hands with these two speakers. James and Brenda, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Mark. And yeah, we're looking forward to discussing some challenges and talking about how they can be addressed with the technology that we work with. So I wanted to start the conversation. We're going to draw on the wealth of experience that Brenda has in the sector, and so I want to start with the first question to you, Brenda. And it's really around this idea of making meaning out of data. And I know we've had conversations in the past, and you've talked about how you've come across some tremendous examples where connecting the dots and creating data visualizations really exposed and allowed the data to tell a story about something that's happening in the organization. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about one of those situations with us, and maybe start off by telling us about the business challenges that your organization was facing before we dive into how you address those.
Right. Working in the school district for 16 years in British Columbia, we saw a lot of interesting things happen over the years. One of the ones that came to the forefront often was that teacher planning and preparation just is a key part of effective learning. And when there was no teacher on call available to replace an absent employee, also known as fail to fill, it could lead to a loss of teacher prep time. Districts needed a way of tracking and monitoring that fail to fill, and the consequences, things like the administrators that had to cover for absent employees, they were taken away from their duties. Teachers that covered for their colleagues, they lost the prep time that they needed to be, using for prepping for their own classes. Repaying that lost prep time cost our district hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. And the fail to fill also affected the students. They would at the last minute have, a new teacher in front of them, or a principal that, they were not prepared to take over those classes. So, was hiring, additional TOCs, would that solve the problem? We weren't sure, so we needed to analyze the data that we had. Once we started visualizing the data, these questions emerged. Things like, how clean is our data? Had a long-term illness been entered incorrectly, and did that look like a fail to fill when it actually wasn't? Did the employee require a replacement? Was the dispatch information entered correctly for the TOC? And so on top of that, then we started to look at trends, like what are the fail to fill trends year over year? And are there schools in the district where the TOCs, they did not want to go to? So, those kinds of questions we were able to start, taking a look at, not always answering, but take a look at. So what I have is a demo for you today. Are you able to see my screen? So you're able to see the screen fine. So this is Sparkrock 365. And at the bottom, we have a Power BI report. So this is our fail to fill dashboard that we've mocked up using development database, and so all of the data is it's not real. You can see that if I click on one of the employees, that it actually reacts inside the system here, but I'll make it a little bit bigger so maybe the rest of you can take a look at it too. So what I have here is attendance. Attendance really is the basis of fail to fill. Do we need to look at attendance? Is there things that need to be addressed to help with the fail to fill? By listing all of the employees that have attendance issues, I can select on one and all of their hours absent would be listed on a calendar. So right off the bat, I'm looking at this employee, and I can see that a pattern emerges. That the power really of Power BI is being able to do that. So in April, May, and June, that employee was away every second Wednesday. So possibly Human Resources is aware of that. You know, the person had a specialized appointment that they needed to attend. But are you aware all the time when those types of patterns emerge? You'll see that John McAllister is listed on here twice. He actually is at 2 different schools. So attendance for both of the schools are listed separately because schools need that type of information. We also have sequential absences. So if I look back at our first employee, it says that there's 11 different events that employee was absent for. And if I sort that from 1 to 11, I can see that, you know, sporadically it's 1 day or 3 days, sometimes 2. If I want to look at the whole district and see who had the most number of days in a row, and you may want to examine all of your employees that had more than 10 days and, you know, to be able to go in and follow up with them. The cards in the middle give you the number of hours that are absent. So this is from April 1st until September 30th data. We had 1,764 hours dispatched. And taking into consideration that not all employees need somebody to cover for them. So if you're a custodian, you might not need somebody to come in, but if you're a teacher, you need somebody. That our fail to fill was 1,273 hours. So with that, we had 181 employees not covered. So it could be the same employee over and over again, but 181 is significant to a school district. Mm-hmm. And then we're tracking with the COVID, we could see that we had 32 employees affected by COVID, and the average number of days that they were absent to date was 9.2 days. There's a breakdown showing the days of the week that you know, most employees take off. So Wednesday had the highest number, Friday the least. Here we can see that COVID is the predominant number of absence issues, and then sick leave. But if I click on COVID, I can see right off that over 2,000 hours were for them. If I wanted to look at sick leave, it's going to populate this information. So I can see, you know, the number of hours is still high, but nothing near what COVID has caused. And you can also, you know, check on a particular day and see exactly which employees were sick on a certain day. So if you needed to go back and take a look. Many districts want the information by, you know, a category. So what does our QP numbers look like? How many QP employees are affected by COVID? What about our principals and vice principals? And what about our teachers? You know, we know that with 17 teachers being affected by COVID, that would make a big impact in a district. We can also look at that same data by school. So if we wanted to look at one school or the next, once again, all of the numbers are being updated for you. Or you may just simply want to see, you know, this school year, and you can filter out last year's information altogether. There's also trend lines, and that's where the story really starts to be told. Power BI patterns start to merge, trends, things that you weren't aware of. One of the ones that we looked at were, December and November every year. So I can, go into that and look at November from last year. Sorry, it's going to reach over and hit both. So November and December. And you can see that, the fail to fill and the number of attendance issues, was getting higher. But there were spikes on particular days. And the one day, the last Friday of November, became a glaring point for us at our district. We had pulled in information probably from the previous 4 years, and we could see the last Friday of November, being also known as Black Friday, was a problem. Our district was right on the border to the States, and so lots were escaping to get some cross-border shopping done. Then we also, took a look and saw that the Fridays before Christmas were also, problems, and that the Friday before, like directly before Christmas, wasn't, because the teachers knew that there would be a penalty if they didn't show up that day. So our superintendent actually sent out a letter to district-wide to all of the employees to say, we now have capability of tracking attendance on Black Friday. We have the information for the last 3 or 4 days, and maybe, or 3 or 4 years. Maybe you should be worried about doing it this year. It worked like a charm, so it was really good. Also on this report, we have, once again, we can track it by school. We can see that, Jasper Place had, a certain number of absences, and our fail to fill is just under half. That Main Street had pretty well half fail to fill, and that Winterburn was only about a 1/3 fail to fill. It actually came to light that some of our schools had higher fail to fill consistently throughout the year. And we realized, after talking to teachers and stuff, that some teachers just did not want to attend at a certain school. Also by, looking by assignment, I can dig right down into, our head secretaries and our custodians and have that information populated for us. We know then that there's 3 custodians and who has been affected. You can get their location and that information in there as well. The trend lines, really important. We would look at September from 1 year and see that there was 361 fail to fill. And then go to, possibly, in this case, March of the 2020. Let's see if I can get this to go down here. And see how, the numbers looked. So we went from 300 and some to 838, so almost triple the number of fail to fill from, the beginning of the year to March. And we realized that, at the beginning of the year, you've got all of your new TOCs in place, you've got all your educators in an assignment. But as the year progressed, you had leaves, teachers going off on maternity leaves, and your TOCs were getting contracts and were being placed in those positions. And, it affected your fail to fill. So just lots of trends, lots of information that you can look at. It makes the picture, start to tell the story.
And that's really remarkable how connecting the dots with the data reveals kind of what's going on and provides much deeper insight and actionable insight as well. So that's a fascinating scenario. So I want to move quickly on to our next sort of question or scenario, which is really around making informed decisions, and also about connecting the dots when you have all the information in front of you, or perhaps a process that may be manual and sort of having it digitally transformed. So can you tell us, a similar scenario, perhaps starting with the problem, the challenge that was put in front of you, and then again, if you can show us kind of some samples of how you were able to address that?
Right. Schools start up, all of the districts out there, they know what a hectic, crazy time of year that is, even, prior to COVID. I used to work in the superintendent's department, and I would see all of them converge into the boardroom for 4 hours at a time, in early September. They would meet, to analyze all the student information and the projections and staffing requirements. They would go in with stacks of paper, and we realized that, we probably could streamline some of that for them. We needed to get away from the paper-based way of consuming our data, to be able to, get those dashboards out there. We also had a Supreme Court ruling in British Columbia that limited class size and composition. So it was crucial to be able to examine every class in the district and make sure that we were, making best efforts to get the right number of students in there. So once we had the best efforts in, we knew then if we needed to start moving teachers around and moving portables. So we created a dashboard that was real time. Started with pulling out some of our demographic information on our students, layered the projections and divisions and everything on that. So I'll show you what that looked like. Here we've just got 2 schools.
And just going back, Brenda, I just wanted to clarify, we did a quick calculation around the amount of time, right? And it was something like, 800 person hours or something, spent in that manual process. So not an insubstantial amount of time spent by
That's
senior individuals in the organization. Yeah.
So yeah, that's right. Yeah, no problem. So after we created the dashboard, they would be in there for an hour, instead of the 4 hours. And we're done much sooner in the month than they had been normally. So it's simply, pulling the demographic information from the student information system, we could map, what grade each of the students were in, how many divisions we had, our high and low incidence special ed students, our Aboriginal and English language learners. And then we could go down, drill down into the homeroom details. So you can see that we have all of the homerooms in here. You can also see these pink highlights. So it made it easy for them to find schools that had too many students in their grade 3 class, or that had a lot of high incidence and low incidence students. So it just brought it to the forefront for them to, be able to, at a glance, to see, which classes they needed to attend to. If I click on the one class here, all of her students now are populated in this visual here. So if I look at the special ed, I'm just going to click that twice. I can see her 3 high incidence and her 2 low incidence students. I can see the Aboriginal learners. And I can see that there's a first year and a second year ELL, so English language learner student in that class. And then by being able to pull information from Sparkrock, I could do the job shares in the class. I knew that Miss Arndt was 0.7 and Miss Gable was a 0.3 in that class. But never before did I have information on the pay grade and pay step, seniority years, union, and salary. And I was able then to do averages, for each class on what the salary and years were. And if I click out of that, you can see it populates that information for all of the divisions. Down below here, I've got listed all of, our learning disability or moderate behavior. So all of the special ed. You can click, do a right click, show the data points. And now all my gifted students are in a list in front of me. I know what school they attend, I know their names, who their teacher is, and what grade they're in. The English language learners, I could tell from the size of the boxes that I have more first and second years than I did students on their way out of the program. I could look at the seniority years of a school and see that Jasper had 16.83 and that Winterburn not quite 10. Those kind of details were great for the superintendent. Do we put a brand new principal into a school where overall the teachers are mainly new, that we've got a small number for our average years, or do we put a more seasoned principal into that school? Also, the total FTE, a great way to be able to track our employees. We can see Ms. Gable here is 0.7, and I can look on the chart here and see that in one class she's a 0.4 and one a 0.3. So is she available for another 0.3 assignment? So lots of information on here, and then we can go into our projections. So from an Excel file, you can pull information into Power BI from Excel, from a student information system, from your finance system, from so many different platforms. So out of an Excel, I knew that over the years from 2017 and 19, what our projected numbers in the schools were and what the actuals were. So you can map that. Winterburn, they were up 5 and then down 20. So often when you map that, you can see if there's any trends. Winterburn being a little sporadic, but Jasper looks like it's got a lot of growth happening there. That they ended up with 15 more students projected than they expected. So it drove another division in that school. We had projected 8 FTE, so 8 classes, but now we needed 9. And November 5th's numbers is available to us now, so we can see that Winterburn is still growing, and Jasper's number have declined a little bit. And even day-to-day projections differences. So Jasper, at the beginning of the month, they were under projections by 15, but by the end of the month, they were up to 11 over projection. Steady growth is a typical pattern. Clerical staff is getting new kindergarten students, new students moving into the district, and they're slowly getting those entered into the system. You can see that was in 2019 and 2020. We are seeing the same trend for that school. But at Winterburn, we're seeing a peak at September 20th, and then it steadily goes down. And once again, in 2020, we're seeing the same thing. This helps us for next year in 2021, where the 3rd week of September, we start to panic thinking that Winterburn is going to need an extra division. But we can take a look and say, okay, what has happened here is that we had steady growth. We had a whole bunch of kids that had enrolled and registered at the school. But about the 3rd week, we realized that, they're probably not going to attend, so that we have to withdraw them. So this gives the superintendents an opportunity to call the principal and say, how many no-shows do you think you're going to have? And are you in need of a class? So just, the storytelling that you've got from Power BI and from your data.
Yeah, a really amazing example of sort of informed decision making, right? Having the data help make informed decisions, and not only the huge time savings of senior individuals sort of poring over data that's on paper or whatever, but really making a real impact on the lives of students and teachers.
Yeah, so and sorry. I was just going to say too that by having this automated like this, we developed a tracking system so that they could put in comments, and so they had an audit trail of all of their decision making, and then it helps maximize the funding for the ministry at the month end in September. So.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So allowing the organization to be far more proactive than before having this data at their fingertips. So.
Right.
So the third question I want to move into now, Brenda, is really around this idea of multiple systems, and everybody on the call is probably familiar with the fact that typically there's at least two major systems in a particular board. A financial system. In some jurisdictions, I know in Ontario, in fact, many boards actually still have 2 separate systems, one HR payroll and a separate finance system, although that's not typical in the rest of North America. So again, but there's a financial and ERP system that includes HR data, and then a student information system. And in many cases, the real meaning, making meaning about what's happening, is an opportunity to connect those two pieces together. So even in the previous example, you showed some information and pointed out that some of it is coming from a student information system and other are coming from a SIS. But I wonder if you can tell us more about that, those kinds of scenarios, and even if there's other sources beyond those two as well, and specifically talking about maybe the challenges that you came across.
Yeah, I have a great example. Our special ed assistants. It was a struggle to monitor that system. We had a complex allocation of 1,300 education assistants and a $50 million budget. It was complicated because it included so many different departments. We got information on the students from the medical health professionals, and our student support staff would have to review that and get that information into the student information system. Then they, with that information, had to assign the EA hours to each of the schools. HR did the assignments and did the postings and filled those positions. Finance would come up with a budget typically every springtime, trying to project what our needs would be. And then once we had this in place, we needed to have a way to track all of this information, not just at the beginning of the school year when the budget was happening, but day to day. So we found that each department, they had their own data. Finance had their budget, HR knew who was assigned, what positions that had not been assigned. Student support knew their students, they knew the staffing requirements, and they knew what education assistance was assigned to each student. We needed to bring all of that information together, and I was a little worried when they came to me and asked me about this one because it was complex. But there was the risk of not monitoring that information in real time. Our most vulnerable students were the ones that could be overlooked. And by having the system in place, we could, track them. And there were times that we had to defend ourselves in human rights cases based on discrimination. And then once students, they would be in one school, they would move, we would be able to track that as well. So really, we started once again by pulling in the student data and then, pulling in more and more information. So I will go back to the same dashboard, and you can see there's an education assistance button here. Our low incidence students are all funded differently. So we had a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. And you can see the funding from finance. So we had $4,500 per student. This is just all mocked up numbers. And the budgets for each of the schools. So we had that for each of these levels. And then from our student information systems, we knew exactly how many students that we had and could calculate the budget and see how we were doing. Our level 1 and 2 students, they were pretty consistent in their designations, not much variation. So it was easier to track them and to budget for them. But our level 3, oftentimes there'd be changes of designations or new designations. And so you can see that we were budgeted for $7,800, but ended up with $13,000 budget. So, and we had 2 extra students at one school and 1 extra one at Winterburn. We could also get Power BI to calculate the FTE. So I'm basing this on 1 full FTE special ed assistant for level 1 and level 2, and a 0.5 for level 3. So it calculated that data, and then it pulled the information from human resources, from the assignments, to see, who do we have in assignments, and, ended up that we were below what we needed. So FTE at Jasper was 1, and at Winterburn we need a 1.5. So we have 10 education assistants. In that, we have 210 hours that are in assignment, but we have 105 in leaves. So if I look at just one school, I can see that we have 5 employees, They're all in assignments. However, we have mat leave here, and we have a gradual return to work here. And so we've lost essentially, 2 FTEs at that point with, the different leaves. So not only is your budget have to, pay for the hands-on employees, but you also have to take into consideration your leaves. So this really helped to inform all the, the decision making for the schools. And that's it.
Yeah, fascinating stuff in terms of being able to connect the dots across multiple platforms. Yeah, thank you so much, Brenda, for sharing your experience with us today about these fascinating challenges that were overcome with this technology. Over to you, Mark. I think we're going to have some time for questions next.
Thank you very much, James and Brenda. That was a fantastic presentation. We will now take a few minutes for questions, etc. As a reminder, if you do have a question, you can submit it by the questions panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We do have a couple to start off. So James, Brenda, first question, paraphrasing, is all great content, but as a district with competing priorities, where should I start?
Yeah, that's a great question. We started in my previous school district 4 years ago, and it was after the American election. The superintendent had been, watching the results, and he loved that you could, select a state and get all of that information. And he saw this little powered by Microsoft at the bottom of the screen. So I got the email at like 11 o'clock at night, and I thought, oh, like, what is this? So we started out having 2 licenses, just the 2 of us. And I pulled, data from Excel, and then I would, experiment with some of the, maybe a demographic file from our student information system, and just started playing, and we were hooked. The best part for me was the fact that you no longer had to download the data from your student information system and upload it into another, maybe Access database or whatever you might be using. Power BI would do that for you. You could publish it, and you could ask it to refresh every day or every hour if you wanted to. And that was game changer for us. It's so start small. Just go in and maybe do your demographic information, and it really is it's not a difficult application to use.
Or start with a failed to fill app or something like that. Yeah. I love that story. I hadn't heard exactly about that, and many of us have been following the U.S. election on similar maps. So a great tie-in to our current times. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. A second question that we do have in, you've mentioned Power BI a lot, Brenda. What are the benefits of that platform over other options?
Well, I think, being new to Sparkrock, the benefit that we had beforehand was, as I said, about the refreshes, of being able to, have the story develop. When I came to Sparkrock, I was a little concerned about how I was going to get the data out of their system. And Power BI allows for about 300 or 400 different methods of importing your data. And Business Central is a direct use. And I was actually quite stunned that it was as easy as it was. Like, it was, great to pull that information out of there. So yeah, it's a Microsoft product. It's available inside of, your platform for 365. It's available right inside now. And so it's a great product. I really quite like working with it, and it's ease of use too. Like it's not overly complicated.
And I would add that, Power BI, there's lots of resources and support out there. Like many Microsoft products, they make it very accessible. Ramping up, learning it is very accessible. And of course, there's some really tremendous preferential pricing for school districts, for education organizations from Microsoft as well. So there's so many benefits. And just like many other products, Power BI many years ago was an acquisition by Microsoft, where they took a solution that would sell for a lot of money, and only larger organizations, very large organizations, could afford that kind of technology. And Microsoft has done they do a great job of democratizing access to these types of technologies and making them accessible, both from a pricing and licensing as well as from an availability. Again, it's cloud technology as well, right? So it's easy to set up and get going with it right away. There's not huge amounts of infrastructure servers that you have to set up. So there's so many benefits like that to Power BI that it makes it kind of, all the other solutions are really not anywhere in the same league. So
awesome. Well, that seems to wrap up the questions that we have today. So I will just wrap the webinar up here. Where do we go from here? We'd also like to make available an overview of the failed fill application that Brenda was discussing as part of today's presentation. We recognize that in these times especially, fail to fill is an increasingly common and complex worry. So feel free to download this application overview to understand how this app might be useful to you in your district. And this brings us to the end of the webinar for today. So thank you again, James and Brenda, for taking the time to share your thoughts and perspectives with us today. And of course, thank you to everyone who joined. I hope you found this webinar as interesting and helpful as I did. And with that, I thank everybody for joining, and I hope you all have a great day.